Today is Tuesday, January 29th. We're talking about the record-setting weather this week and how it could impact the Super Bowl. Plus, could the former head of Starbucks be president? What to expect next from Apple, and the sport that has its youngest champion ever. Welcome to the Newsworthy. All the day's news in less than 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Get ready, the Midwest is expecting the coldest weather in decades this week. The Weather Channel says some areas like Chicago will have highs in the negative double digits, with wind chills as low as negative 60 in some spots like in North Dakota and Minnesota. And as thousands of football fans arrive in Atlanta for the Super Bowl on Sunday, winter weather is causing some concern there as well. ESPN says Delta Airlines already canceled nearly 200 flights from Atlanta's airport because of the incoming weather. Atlanta is expecting a couple inches of snow this week, and even though that's really not a whole lot, Atlanta is known to pretty much shut down with any snow. And speaking of a shutdown and the Super Bowl, CBS now says right before the big game on Sunday, it'll air the president's first network TV interview since the government reopened. You'll also see clips of the interview during the pregame show. There is a new date for President Trump's State of the Union address. Remember, it was originally scheduled for today, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi canceled it during the government shutdown. Now USA Today says the president will deliver his address next week on February 5th from the Capitol. Also, a new nonpartisan report found the 5-week ordeal cost the U.S. economy $11 billion. The Congressional Budget Office says most of that will be reversed now that federal workers are back on the job, but $3 billion is gone for good. Of course, the question still is, will the government shut down again next month? Remember, the new deadline now is February 15th. A panel of 17 lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are negotiating border security, so stay tuned. Talks are underway for a new peace deal between the U.S. and the Taliban. And if it works out, it could mean U.S. troops leave Afghanistan within 18 months of an agreement. Right now, the deal is in the beginning stages, but the U.S. chief negotiator says this could be the first big step toward ending 17 years of war. The New York Times reports the peace deal would send troops home if the Taliban agrees to a ceasefire and to talk directly with the Afghan government. The Taliban would also have to agree to stop giving terrorists a safe haven. But The Guardian reports the Taliban has not agreed to all of those terms, just the framework of the deal so far, so to be continued. The U.S. is taking action against two international companies for two separate reasons. First, CNET reports the Justice Department is charging Chinese tech firm Huawei with stealing trade secrets from U.S. companies, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. And the chief financial officer is also charged and detained in Canada. China calls it unfair and immoral. Keep in mind, Huawei is the number 2 smartphone maker after Samsung and the world's largest supplier of telecom equipment. And also in Venezuela, Bloomberg reports the Treasury Department put sanctions on an oil giant owned by the government there. The goal? Force the current president out of office and give the keys to the country's wealth to the opposition leader. Right now, both men are claiming to be president. And by the way, the White House says the oil sanctions should not impact U.S. gas prices. A new report says President Trump's new tax law did not do everything he said it would. That's at least what the National Association of Business Economics found. Remember, in 2017, President Trump pushed for and signed into law the biggest changes in tax code in more than 30 years. It cut the corporate tax rate, which was supposed to make sure companies spend more and hire more. But Reuters reports the new survey found most, 84%, of companies say after 1 year, they actually did not change their hiring or investment plans. But the New York Times says other independent analyses found many individual Americans should see a tax cut in this first year of the new law, and economists are eager to see how it affects this year's tax returns. The official tax season is now underway. From running a coffee company to running the United States, the former head of Starbucks told CBS News he's thinking about running for president. The AP reports billionaire Howard Schultz calls himself a lifelong Democrat, but would run in 2020 as an independent. His potential plans aren't sitting well with Democrats. Some Democrats worry he might split the Democratic vote and help President Trump win another term. Trump tweeted Schultz doesn't have the guts to run. Schultz says he's going on a book tour around the country for a couple of months and will use that time to decide if he'll actually run for president in 2020. Several more stories ahead, but a quick break for today's sponsor, Podcast Movement. The number of people listening to podcasts and on-demand audio is going up. So if you've ever thought about being a part of a podcast, or maybe you already are, either way, be sure to make it to Podcast Movement this August in Orlando. It's one of my favorite events of the year. And it was the first conference I went to when I first launched The Newsworthy. I learned so much about equipment, marketing, monetizing, and I met so many great people in the industry. I've even become a speaker myself. So, of course, I'm going back to Podcast Movement this year, and I want to meet you there. Join me, get your ticket. The organizers have even hooked up the Newsworthy listeners with a discount. Go to podcastmovement.com and use the code Newsworthy for $50 off your registration. And then listen for details about a meetup for the Newsworthy listeners as we get closer to the big event. Again, go to podcastmovement.com, use the code Newsworthy for $50 off. I'll see you there. Now, back to the news. A recent study shows there are around 3 million cybersecurity job openings around the world, and not enough people with the skills to fill them. TechCrunch says businesses are having a tough time protecting themselves from cyber attacks with just software, especially small businesses. And 2019 might be the worst year yet for cyber attacks. That said, some states and colleges are reportedly working with organizations to help fill those open positions. Facebook is revealing more details about an independent review board it's launching, something it says will be kind of like the Supreme Court of Facebook, having the final say about the most important issues. Wired reports the new review board would be made up of 40 independent experts that will take on the company's decisions that have been appealed, ultimately deciding things like whether certain posts should be taken down or not. Also, The Guardian reports there's a new so-called war room based in Dublin, getting ready for election season in the EU. Facebook says it will focus on election integrity and try to fight false news. But some critics call the whole thing a PR stunt. Apple could be working on a subscription service that's kind of like Netflix, but for gamers. Cheddar cites sources saying users would pay a monthly fee and get access to various game titles. It's apparently in the early stages, so we'll see if this actually happens. Of course, we already know Apple is planning to launch a video streaming service for entertainment. The information says to expect that one to launch as early as this April. Also today, Apple is set to reveal its latest earnings and forecasts, which will surely affect the stock market. Dropbox is making its largest purchase ever. The company is set to pay $230 million for the company HelloSign, which helps businesses go paperless with things like e-signatures. CNBC reports this will put Dropbox in competition with Adobe and DocuSign, which both already let people e-sign documents and contracts. Dropbox is known for its cloud storage and file sharing options. The deal is set to finalize within the next couple of months. The old-school way to mail things just got a little more expensive. The U.S. Postal Service raised the price of forever stamps by 5 cents, which, by the way, the AP says is the largest price jump for the stamps ever. So forever stamps will now cost 55 cents each. NBC News says the Postal Service is raising prices to try and make up for the $4 billion lost last year. But keep in mind, you can still use the forever stamps you already own. Forever stamps are valid forever. Alyssa Liu is just 13 years old, and she's now officially the youngest U.S. women's figure skating champion ever. She made history Friday with her win, and before her, Tara Lipinski was the youngest American champion at age 14. USA Today reports Liu is still too young for upcoming world titles, but she will be eligible for the 2022 Winter Olympics, so the world is watching. And that's it. You are all caught up. If you enjoy getting the news here each day, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. It's free and helps make sure you are sent new episodes so you're always in the know. And you can always read more about the stories we talk about here. I try to make it easy for you by listing all the stories and sources in today's show notes. Just go to the homepage of thenewsworthy.com, click episodes, and then look for today's date. The Newsworthy is ready for you to listen every weekday by 4 in the morning. I'll be back with more news tomorrow. Have a great day.